In his studies of the Pentateuch, Hofmann challenges the hermetical Jewish canon and thus opens it up to new exegetical interpretations hitherto unknown within the German neo-Orthodoxy. In his Torah commentary, published together with a translation of the Hebrew Bible into German, he relies upon views of contemporary leading Protestant scholars, using their terminology and methods. The finds of Bible criticism led Hofmann to write a comprehensive contribution published in 1902, confronting the theory of the Protestant theologian Julius Wellhausen. However, Hofmann's decision to study Bible criticism in depth was a first necessity that he would have liked to avoid. He sees Bible criticism as a threat and described its influence on students in the Berlin seminary in 1907 as dragging them away from faith. When considering Hofmann's collective writings, it is evident that the impact of his halachic and exegetical-centered studies, especially his responsa, have prevalence over his apologetic contributions. There are also good reasons to believe that Hofmann was aware that his apologetica would have little influence. This part of his legacy include writings related to Bible criticism, publications opposing Reform Judaism, and works in defense of the Talmud against contemporary anti-Semitic voices. Looking at the wide range of this work, the combination of arguments from the world of critical Bible scholarship together with a classical rabbinic commentary is innovative. Rabbiner Hirsch tried as far as possible to avoid any intellectual exchange and dialogue with non-Orthodox views, whereas the modernist aimed at overcoming tensions between historic critical approaches and traditional Jewish faith by questioning the mosaicity of the Torah. Hofmann's blend of Jewish classical interpretative tradition of the Torah and the scientific theories of 19th century Protestant Bible scholars is unique in Orthodox exegetical literature. His attitude towards the historic critical approach is extant throughout his exegetical writings, including in some still unpublished fragments. It is most evident in his Bible commentary. Considering this, we should ask two questions which are intertwined. First, Hofmann's Torah commentary, which was written for an educated Jewish public, belongs to a traditional genre of rabbinic scholarship. Why does he then include reflections and references to contemporary critical theories as taught in Protestant theological faculties? Second, how was Hofmann's stand in regard with Torah and exegetical critical scholarship embedded in the ideology of German Jewish orthodoxy? The present paper aims at addressing both questions. That the study of the Bible at the Berlin Rabbinical Seminary was given central attention is by no means self-evident. It was a novum in a yeshiva-like institution which the Berlin Seminary was. The interpretative activity of the Bible at the seminary reached far beyond the scope of classical Jewish tradition. It is rooted in the educational concept which combines religious and profane subjects as taught by Asriel Hildesheimer. We heard about it already today. This approach is reflected in the extension on the seminary's curriculum, which includes scientific research on the Pentateuch in an academic and Christian context. Following the curriculum of traditional Jewish learning, Hofmann began his Bible commentary with the book of Leviticus. According to the introduction to the Leviticus volume, this work developed out of excerpts from lectures given over several years for the seminar students. He published this commentary in 1905 and 1919 in 2 half volumes. A part of his commentary on Genesis appears in the second part of his book against Wellhausen's documentary hypothesis of 1914, while other parts on Genesis and Exodus, titled Probleme der Pentateuch-Exegese, were printed in scattered articles in the first 6 volumes of the journal Yeshurun between 1914 and 1921. Until the 1970s, a complete manuscript of Hofmann's commentary for Genesis and Exodus was extant. The German manuscript, which was brought to Israel by Moshe Yehuda Hofmann, one of Hofmann's sons, and Rabbi Kalman Kahana, who studied at the seminar before 1938. Asher Wasserteil, a student of Rabbi Yechiel Jacob Weinberg, translated the commentary on Genesis and Exodus into Hebrew in the late 1970s. This translation is not complete, since Wasserteil omits Hofmann's longer explanations on Bible criticism and historical paraphrases. Other details were moved to footnotes, since, I quote, the significance of Bible criticism was no longer relevant, unquote. Let's come back to Hofmann's commentary. The intertwined dealing with rabbinical interpretation and arguments facing Bible criticism is expressed in a formal methodological style using historicizing patterns. First, Hofmann does not adapt the method of the classical medieval biblical commentaries, the verse-for-verse interpretation, Dibur HaMaterial. Neither he follows the homily midrashim method, in which entire parashiot or segments of Torah readings are dwelt on. He rather chooses several verses, which he presents in German translation before his commentary column, without printing the original Hebrew text. The choice of a group of verses as a unit serves to highlight the focus of the discussion. It also facilitates a comparison with other passages in the Bible, which are sometimes juxtaposed and discussed in parallel, such as, for example, Leviticus chapters 18 to 20 and Ezekiel, parts of Ezekiel. Second, Hofmann's commentary is characterized by clauses regarding a variety of topics such as geography of the Bible, investigations into the Sitz im Leben of certain passages, grammatical and philological matters, comments on the historic critical discourse, or on archaeological evidence. Hofmann quotes Hebrew, Aramaic, Arabic, Greek, and other languages, often in their original. He refers to periodicals from the Jewish and non-Jewish press, such as the Magazin für die Wissenschaft des Judentums or the Protestantische Kirchenzeitung. He draws upon the entire range of rabbinic literature, Talmud and Midrash, and classical Bible interpretations. He cites from interpreters such as Mendelssohn and Luzzatto, and to Wissenschaftsscholars, for example, Heinrich Grätz, Moritz Steinschneider, Leopold Zunz, or Abraham Geiger's Urschrift. When referring to the new critics, scholars engaged in Bible criticism Hofmann's reflections on their evaluations and analysis are not always negative. In fact, he explicitly declares some of their assumptions to be correct. At the same time, Hofmann does not refrain from criticizing interpretations of traditional Jewish exegetes. However, he generally designates textual emendations by the new critics as arbitrary. Hofmann often argues from a historical point of view. To give a number of examples, first, according to him, Exodus 29 represents, together with Leviticus chapters 6 and 7, a complete priestly sacrifice law. He justifies their being dealt with separately by the fact that the regulations of the offering in Exodus 29 were valid before the installation of the tabernacle, while those in Leviticus were introduced thereafter. Second, similarly, in trying to take the wind out of the sails of Bible criticism, he refers to a Talmudic discussion in Bavli Sota 3a, explaining repetitions of entire passages in the Torah as the necessary background for the implementations of a new law. Third, Hofmann at times is ready to accept some of the ideas of lower Bible criticism, allowing for later interpolations. Thus, he writes about the narrative passage in Deuteronomy 2 and 3, chapter 2 and 3, stating that is, I quote, includes several ancient historical notes as parentheses, which probably were not spoken during the speech, but were added as a later stage when Moses wrote his speech down, unquote. The idea of phrases being in parentheses is a recurring theme in Hofmann's arguments against critics challenging the unity of the biblical text. Hofmann's approach to the educated Jewish reader may also be the reason for his use of topics that were in high demand in contemporary Jewish discourse. These subjects that were important for 19th century Judaism play a significant role in Hofmann's commentaries. Setting halakha against non-Jewish law, Jewish versus non-Jewish ethics, and Jewish rationality versus Kabbalah and mysticism. These aspects address a tension between humanism and halakha. Hofmann's purpose is to justify the moral status of certain biblical and Talmudic passages within their historical context. We already heard about this also today. Textual criticism and philological methods played an important part in shaping his conclusions. Hofmann cites and relies on manuscripts, compares and explains the use of termini technici, and speaks in favor of specific translations. He comments on later reductional additions within the text and on the influence of Christian censorship. Yet, in merging the documentary hypothesis with rabbinic Judaism, Hofmann needs to set limits. He does so at the beginning of his Torah commentary in the introduction to Leviticus with his often cited dictum, I quote, I willingly admit that on the basis of the articles of my faith, it would be unable to conclude that the 5 books of the Torah were written after the times of Moses or by someone other than Moses, but in my wish to scientifically ground these fundamental assumptions, I have always tried to put forth only those arguments that person holding other fundamental views could acknowledge as correct. These statements represent the ideology of the Berlin Rabbinical Seminary and point out its position within the German Jewish Orthodoxy. Hofmann's exegesis was not as popular with German Orthodoxy as was that of Hirsch. The latter acquired a classical status not only in the Frankfurt circle of German Orthodoxy. Hirsch was regarded by many as the new Rashi on the Torah. In Hirsch's Bible commentaries, universal ethical issues designate the path. In contrast, Hofmann's scholarly style is detailed analysis of halachic matters are rather hard to digest. The scholarly material is abandoned and the arguments at times sophisticated. Therefore, it remained restricted to the circle of the Berlin Seminary. It is doubtful whether Hofmann's enormous exegetical efforts ever succeeding to bridge the gap between the historic critical approach and the integrity of the Torah. Mark Moderei Braude, a rabbinic scholar from Galicia who studied at the Berlin Seminary, for example, reports that Bible criticism did not play a genuine role in the teaching of the seminary and that Hofmann, in spite of the enormous efforts he invested, could not really satisfy the dissenters. Jakob Rosenheim points out that students of the seminary who also enrolled at the Berlin University generally kept away from subjects such as Oriental studies and Semitic languages. He writes, Dr. David Hofmann's, whose brilliant scholarly thought had gradually been dedicated to the rejection of Bible criticism, offered his students a certain amount of support against these spiritual temptations. But there was no one who could have guaranteed students who were not torn by doubt. More principled criticism came from the camp of Frankfurt Orthodoxy. The Jüdische Monatshefte, edited by the Ansbach Rabbi Pinchas Cohn and the Frankfurt Rabbi Shlomo Breuer, formulated it as follows. Anyone who had ever been close to a yeshiva will and must be touched like by an ice-cold breath of un-Jewish thought from foreign regions when he see Rashi and Ramban mentioned in apologetic writing together with Kittel and Wellhausen. A mocking side blow at Hoffmann is also extant in the fictional work Ein Kampf um Gott, A Battle for God, by Isaac Breuer, a grandson of Hirsch, who let his protagonist say, and listen very well, it's very up to date. Wherever Bible criticism finds something new, Germany's Orthodox Jews begin to totter. And one immediately is sent to the Great Serum Institute in Berlin to get a vaccination underway. Such vaccinations are always necessary. The body of German Jewish Orthodoxy is already completely sore from them. Unquote. I conclude. With his Pentateuch studies, Hofmann opened the traditional Jewish canon to a diversity of interpretations hitherto unknown with the circle of German neo-Orthodoxy. In his Bible commentary, scholarly non-Jewish insights, together with rabbinic exegesis, shape a new dimension of knowledge manifesting the burning branch of German Orthodoxy. In doing so, Hofmann adapts methodological approaches of non-Jewish scholarships and accepts principle of lower Bible criticism. However, Hofmann's symbiosis does not open up a general hermeneutic theory. According to him, the proper understanding of the Bible is subject to the dogma of Moses' authorship of the Torah, and the rabbinic rule of interpretation. The biblical text cannot be isolated from its rabbinic interpretative context. Hofmann is an outstanding example of the diversity and fragmentation of German Jewish orthodoxy. He strives to harmonize between Jewish interpretative principles with the argument of critical Bible research. He criticized the latter methodology only when it contradicts the unity of the Torah. Hofmann responded by referring to a vast number of traditional Jewish sources which, according to him, bears his seat on an answer to questions raised by Bible criticism. We can only speculate how things would have been developed if German Jewish orthodoxy, with their overall embedment in European culture, would still exist. That Hofmann's method did not grow into a new school of biblical exegesis is certainly a consequence of the destruction of European Jewry during World War II. After the Shoah, Hofmann's use of the terminology, the themes, and the scholarly discussion which were prevalent in Protestant academic circles of his time was harmful to any sort of continuity. This does not allow for a further expansion of Hofmann's approach outside the German Jewish context. Thank you very much.